event coming up that looks like might be worth investigating more, either me or one of our reporters contacting somebody. We don't have specific relationships with the other organizations. I do think that for the most part, we all have a slightly different niche. So there's not too much overlap. I mean, we might cover the same story from different perspectives on occasion. I think we'd be open. Deb and I have talked very, very briefly, about 10 seconds, about, hey, maybe we could do something together sometime. What would that look like? Probably with some other media, not printed media, but some kind of broadcast or something. Open to that. And I think I've also know that on occasion we've gotten submissions. Somebody suggested a story and we said, it's not really our field, but you might want to go to Works in Progress, you might want to go to the Green Pages. They'd be more interested in that. So we've sent out occasionally a few other things. So I think it's generally a friendly relationship, but it's not a real close one.
Yeah, I would agree, because we're across so many different platforms between broadcast and print and everything else. But it's a collaboration in a lot of ways. I know that our publisher likes to have us out on the street and more than jumping on the hot issue of the day, unless it's something we can really cover intellectually. He likes to have us out there talking to the people, and the whole South Sound, it doesn't really cross over with, say the niche, not the niche, but the focus market here. And I guess the other piece of it is just that, the stories that I think we all cover from a different perspective. Ours is from more an outside South Sound. How does this relate in Mason, Lewis, South Pierce, as opposed to just Thurston or this region?
So, Rick, this is a question for you. Senior News, how do the readers support the donation calls for support?
How do they do it?
Yeah.
They send money.
But do they do it, are they do it overwhelmingly? Do you get enough money from that way?
Well, there's never enough, but yes, we do pretty well. We probably hear from a third of the readers, which I think is pretty good. If we charge subscriptions in the paper to be small, we wouldn't be able to benefit the advertising as much. So it's our mandate to be a free paper. Yes, without them, we would not survive.
Okay.
And they also tell us things. They write what they like and what they don't like. So it says that our demographic is probably a 70-year-old woman, but that might mean that 70-year-old women donate money and fill out questionnaires. So you don't really know who it is, but that's what it is.
The other portion of this is, how many of you have Facebook pages? Okay, so
as an organization or personally?
as an organization. Because the question is, are Facebook followers important?
I would say yes. I think social media in general, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, they are important in helping to build your network of supporters, not necessarily your electronic network. It can be a challenge to figure out how to effectively use social media, and we at TCTV are struggling with that to some extent. But I do think that if it's not Facebook, it'll be something else, Twitter, whatever, in the future, and we're going to see that these interlocking kind of systems are going to become more and more important for sharing information. My mother is 84 years old, and she was trying to understand the Facebook, Twitter phenomenon. She doesn't want to do it, she just wants to understand it. And the way I put it to her was, being on Facebook is like being on a telephone tree. If you all remember, I grew up, my grandmother was the secretary of the Republican Party in Muskingum County where I grew up, so, I have since seen the light, so don't worry. My grandmother never disowned me for moving to the left coast, but I remember her explaining to me how a telephone tree is. I've got 5 phone numbers, and I call those 5 people and tell them, meet at 7 o'clock. And then every one of those 5 people has 5 phone numbers and they call 5. And that's kind of how social media works. I send the message to my 5 people and each of them send the message to their 5 people, and pretty soon the logarithm kicks in and you've contacted 1,000 people, I don't know what the math is on that, by, making 5 phone calls. And that's kind of how social media works. And that she understood. So I think it's very important, but you have to nurture it. You have to nurture it.
And I think, again, it's about compelling content. You can write all day on Facebook and tweet all you want, but if what you're tweeting is like, I'm going to go use the restroom now, nobody cares.
Exactly.
Really, what you have to be writing about and talking about is the same as on TV, as in newspapers and on radio, wherever. It has to be something that people are interested in, whatever the medium is for getting the message across.
Twitter is the fastest, and it's the best for breaking news. It's also the least attributed because you've just got that handful of characters. So all you can say is the cops are going there, or there's a big crash at exit 95. Very basic information. One of our reporters, our newest reporter who just came to us from Billings, is really good at Twitter. She will live tweet from a meeting, and she uses those tweets as the structure of her notes so that then she can come back and write off her tweets. Also, it means that me or who else is back in the newsroom can be doing online updates, writing a story. We can do that with breaking news. We might not do it at a city council meeting, but if there's a breaking story that's being tweeted, we can restructure those into a story for online. And then on Facebook, we put a few stories on there. Facebook is a good driver to the website. It's not a duplicate of the website. But Facebook is a place where people are accustomed to interacting, so if you want to solicit opinions or information, it's a good place to do that.
I have a question for you. Do you moderate comments on your sites, either your newspaper site or on your Facebook site?
Yes,
Can
and
you
our
repeat the
commenters are
question?
vile.
Can
Pardon me?
you repeat the question? My question was, do you moderate the content of the comments on the site? When people comment, is it unfiltered or is it filtered?
We do not moderate before they're posted, and we do have a report abuse function that flags them for us. We know that some of our commenters seem to live on our site and just enjoy being nasty. We do have terms of use, and we frequently ban people from our site. The thing is that they can just go create another ISP address and come back on. So it's too big a job for our staff to moderate every single comment all the time, but we do watch, and if we know a story is controversial, we'll watch it. We have shut down comment threads on controversial stories.
And all the things she said about Twitter is why we don't have a Twitter feed. We have broken 2 stories in 2 years, where we were the first paper to get to them. And that's just not enough reason to have a Twitter feed. It would be kind of pointless. So we focus on the papers, first of all, the website secondary. We do use a little bit of Facebook, as you said, to drive people to the website.
Yeah, I think that's something that WIP struggles with in general is online presence, especially because we're a volunteer-run organization. We're really understaffed right now and have a lot of challenges in that way. And one of them is online, just website and Facebook. And we do have a Facebook, but I think that's one thing that could help, with the smaller niche papers is figuring out how to then transfer that online and, like what Toni was saying, create that compelling content, because it's hard, as someone who uses Twitter and Facebook personally, it's a lot of times I find different news organizations just tweet their own stories, and it's hard to know, when it's breaking news and when it's just promoting the organization. And so it's kind of trying to figure a balance between those two, I think would be good. And that's something that we need to improve with WIP, is just figuring out how to get that online presence with an all volunteer staff.
But you do have content online.
Yeah, we do have content online. I personally find the site very out of date and hard to use. So we'd love to get someone to redesign it and make it easy to upload new information.
I will speak from speech's standpoint in that regard. I would like to recognize and honor Scott Bishop, Can you stand? Because Scott Bacon is the web guru for many local organizations on websites. And so he posts our issues of green pages on there. What we are exploring is looking at trying to have actual breaking news and more ongoing coverage like you provide on the Olympian, Jerre. And the other thing is that we've been thinking about doing a Facebook. My experience recently with Facebook is for the Association for Experiential Education. I'm helping organize a conference. And what I have found is that likes on Facebook can be a big thing, because every time you click that you like something, that goes out to all of your friends. And they then get alerted to the fact that there's going to be this Northwest Regional AEE conference up in Squamish, British Columbia. And so and we had our registration, which a week and a half ago was at about 15. And now we're suddenly up at 85. And whether you can attribute all of that to Facebook and our blog site and so forth, I don't know. But it is definitely something that news media has to explore. Do anybody else want to say anything in that regard?
I was just going to make a comment about Twitter, and I think the big problem with Twitter is the limitation, obviously, of amount of content. It's not suitable. It's really suitable for breaking information. We use Twitter only for traffic. Basically, there is a traffic jam here. Before we can even get on the air, you can tell somebody instantly because you've got a person out there who sees it and tells people. And other people say, oh, I'm in it too, and it started here, and this is what happened. It's very immediate. It isn't really, but the big problem with it is the limitation of size, but also there's just a whole lot of what we used to call junk mail, and then we started calling spam, and now I'll call just crap. Like I said, people updating you on, I got a latte. And it kind of is a lot of noise to signal ratio, unfortunately.
I think from an organizational perspective, though, I mean, when you look at you looked at the Thurston County or Thurston Community Television Facebook page, what you see on that is information relative to our organization or to the community at large. We don't announce our bathroom trips on that. I mean, but you're welcome. But it's not. The challenge with social media is using it in such a way that it drives people to other sources, other types of media, so that your Facebook page or your Twitter feed drives people to your Facebook page, your Facebook page drives people to your web page, in our case, our web page says, hey, you want to watch a show, here's the schedule, drives them to the channel. So it's how you use them interconnectedly to create that information cycle.
Here's a comment from Sandia from WIP also, from Works in Progress, that Works in Progress has actually archived 20 plus years of issues on their website. So that's a pretty incredible resource. Thank you for that information. Something else that this has to do with public power, and I'm going to skip the statement in favor of public power, but the question is about how decisions get made of what is important to cover. Obviously, power in any community has a major impact on citizens, and yet there was, according to this questionnaire, nobody covered the Utilities and Transportation Commission hearings on Puget Sound Energies, which I don't know if everybody knows this, but it's owned by Macquarie, which is a Australian company. It was bought out about 2 years ago. And so talk about locally owned. So on their last rate increase request. And so how do stories of that major impact just sort of fall through the cracks and don't get picked up by anybody?
Sorry.
Well, we're struggling with a staffing problem now. Many of you probably know our editorial page editor, Mike Oakland. He slipped in our parking lot on Martin Luther King Day and severely broke his arm and has been out of the office since then, which means that our environmental and public utilities reporter, John Dodge, has been writing editorials and running the editorial board, which means that we have had trouble covering that beat since the first of the year. And that's just a reality of our staffing. And that's how things fall through the cracks.
Another way is that, for example, we wouldn't cover that just because it's a little bit outside our niche. And we have a hard enough time covering things within our niche. And I think everybody here has to some degree a niche. Some are larger than others. But it's hard to ensure necessarily that every story everywhere in the community is going to get covered by one of those. I mean, the ideal in some way would be that we'd be able to identify a story that sort of needs to go to everybody in the community and somehow that would get out. It doesn't work on that end. It starts with somebody, at the newspaper working on it. One way to help that is, I would think, to maybe bring up a slightly related topic, is the notion of how people in the community can start making the news, be the news writers themselves. And I think, just glancing real quick, at least 3 of the organizations up here have a relatively low bar for a member of the community to get involved. Not absolutely. The lowest bar would be just, make your own blog and stick it up there. And that doesn't mean the others don't have some degree of a way for a community member to get involved and start writing things, but there are at least a few outlets where somebody, most of our writers are people who are just out in the community who said, I wanted to write something. And sometimes they come with ideas, sometimes they don't. But a lot of our stories are their suggestions that they heard about something and they bring it to us. And so making sure that people know that there are opportunities out there to go and do a TV show, for example. Or Works in Progress is kind of even easier to get into because it's all volunteer run. There's not even the screen of, in this case, the publishers.
Chaos does training for people to do their own radio.
Chaos has training to radio station. And there's versions of it. You can also start your own blog. I think a lower level, slightly a notch down, is Oli blog, where you can pretty much sign up and start posting things. But there's, I don't mean to cast this badly, like at MIXX 96, there's like the calendar listings where people submit their own things and get them out there. And there's a lot of calendars like that where you have to submit, you have to go find them, but members of the public can then get their own item listed.
So, actually, Tania had asked if she could comment.
Yeah, on that, comment in Works in Progress in the front page says, if you don't see something written in Works in Progress that's important to you, it's because you're not writing it. So if there is something that's important, that's going to be happening in the community that you think is important to write, and you're not a writer, at least contacting Works in Progress, or consider writing, because there are people that can help with your writing if you're interested, or you can become a writer. Marissa is convening, and more recently, a few people are beginning to be on kind of a writing group within Works in Progress, and you can become that. Anyone can start that process, and if you don't end up being someone who's writing things that are acceptable, because there certainly are things that aren't published in Works in Progress, we'll work that out with you, or we'll figure out who that is. That's a fit for you.
There are a lot of tools out there, but they don't necessarily come to you.
I couldn't resist either jumping in. And you know what, folks, there really will be an opportunity for you to just raise your hand and ask questions. We thought of this idea just to kind of get us rolling. It's kind of getting to the point where maybe people are wanting to jump out of their seats and say something in response to some things that are being said here.
Okay, get to your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, on that note, I did make a list of the meetings that I've gone to, and just like less in the last couple weeks, just because I am not able to get to them on my blog, but this is what meetings I've gone to. The Power Initiative meeting, that's what got me thinking. At MIXX 96, thank you, Toni, for making your room available also to the community. We really appreciate that. Senior Lobby Day up at the Capitol, that was February 23rd. Nobody covered that. I happened to interview Casey Cochran of PSE to get going on the whole initiative story. I attended the critical area ordinance hearing about the prairie and oak trees, and Ralph Boone covered that, and I even emailed him later, and I said, good job covering it, so I didn't feel like I needed to do that. I went to the SWONA Neighborhood Association annual meeting and picked up quite a lot of good information there. That's the Southwest Neighborhood Association meeting. I attended a discussion by Jen Marlowe, who's a local writer. She wrote An Hour of Sunlight, and that was very interesting. Karen Rogers' birthday party was awesome, and there were a lot of great people there. Got a few leads there that I'm going to be working on. And then, of course, lately I've been hot on Lot, so my last 3 stories have been about Lot. And I also went to the board retreat that I told Rolf about, but he wasn't able to go on Saturday. And then this morning I went to a TMDL meeting from 9 to 12, the SHOES advisory group at the Tumwater Fire Station. So there's definitely no shortage of stories here, and I see no reason why any of us should be, in competition with each other. And I just really would like to see us collaborate as much as possible.
Okay, so Jerry, you promised that we weren't going to have you be the target of all of the questions, but this is basically, what do you think is the most effective method that a local nonprofit can use to get coverage of the Olympian?
Well, first you have to tell us about it. And what I've been telling people for years is, as soon as you know the details of your event, time, date, place, let us know so that we can put it into the mix. We too have an online calendar where we ask people to self-input their information, and we do mine that for things. But mostly what we try to do is let people know what's happening, so if they want to participate in your event or fundraise or whatever, that they have that chance. We are less interested usually in covering the event, because by the time we can write about it, it's over. So we think the most effective thing we can do generally is to let people know enough in advance so that they can participate if they want. But you have to tell us. There's, we have a really easy email. It's news@theolympian.com, and that gets parceled out to everybody. Like Toni says, her email comes in and she sends it out to everybody. Everybody looks at that. Does that answer the question?
And I'll throw in, having both been on the newspaper side and sent press releases to the Olympian, among other places and other jobs, say something interesting.
Well, yeah, don't send me an email that says press release. Send me an email that says sex at city council, and I guarantee we'll look at it.
Exactly.
We're going to get a barrage of those now.
Be bold, be different, say something, have an event that I haven't heard and seen around
And make
town
clear that
10
it's
times.
local, so that it's clear looking at the email that it's local.
And one thing I would always advise people, so we tell advertisers, and this is very true, because everyone publicizing their event isn't the same, they're all doing the same thing. You want to have people at your event. What is unique about your event? What is different about your event? Why should I pay attention to your event? Tell me in like 5 words or less, right up front, why I should pay attention to this, as opposed to Janine listed 20 events she's been in the last 2 weeks. What's special about this one? What's different about it? What's interesting? Not, it's happening on the 5th of May. Well, you can put that up, but only the people who are looking for it will find it. Tell me why the event is compelling and what it is, why I should care, why I should be interested, why I should spend my time doing it. And that's, a lot of people, they know that themselves, so of course they don't bother to tell you that, because they know why it's interesting. They don't need to tell you that, but you do need to tell the public that to get people to come. And to get the paper to cover it, or the radio station to cover it, or somebody to make an issue of it.
I think that's a great point, and also look at the medium or the people that they're serving. Like for us, why is it important to the business community? What benefits does it bring? How will it create jobs? Will it have economic benefits? How is your event relevant to what we do as a paper, as a show? And we've taken many ideas and turned them into articles or South Sound Business Examiner shows, simply because this little nugget had a great benefit to our readers, our viewers.
Okay, this is another question that goes to everybody. Climate change is real, coming faster than anyone thought, destructive as an atomic bomb. yet the public doesn't care. Isn't that because they don't hear about it? Isn't it your job to make sure they hear about it?
Well, it's pretty hard for local media to do a lot with a global issue.
Oh, no.
I mean, we do have access to lots of national and international news sources, and we try to use that information. But as far as our local reporters reporting on it, we're not, unless there's an issue here, and we did report on the biomass controversies, and we've done a lot of environmental reporting for a long time. The environment has been a key topic for our coverage.
See, that's about the potential sea level rise.
Right.
Downtown.
And we've reported on sea level rise. We've done a lot of Puget Sound cleanup, which is not exactly related, but that's, as far as the global science, that's not something that an Olympian reporter is going to be able to do very much with.
Yeah, I would just say, I know that in the last 3 years, there have probably been a dozen different programs, either produced by TCTV members who had an interest in the topic, or coverage of events like the Sea Level Change Forum that was held that the city put together. And those have been on the channel. And I think, you know, what interests me about the question is sometimes it's not that people aren't being told, it's the way they're being told, or the editorial spin on what's being told. And I'm not necessarily referring to anybody sitting at the table, but the national media also has become as polarized as our political environment has become. So it's very difficult, I think, for people to hear the word climate change or global warming, or however you want to phrase that, and unless you are involved with an environmentally focused organization, you know, people's eyes tend to glaze over because they're in some ways they've been pounded on about it with a diatribe as opposed to a discussion or dialogue about it. And it's not just climate change. It's, you know, a lot of, you know, healthcare reform or whatever. Every major issue facing our local community and our global community is being presented in national mainstream, especially electronic media, in a very polarized way. And it's you're either with us or you're against us when it comes to this issue. And it's very hard to get reasonable information that's presented in a way that we can just flat out discuss it and learn more about it. And I find that as a television person, I deal strictly with the local side of things, but the national television media just drives me crazy. And I have a whole lot to say about that, but I won't.
Well, this is a question that I'll pose to the panel, but anybody else can chime in. Is basically, what is the best source for online discussions of local issues?
Depends on your point of view.
Depends on what issue you're talking about.
Depends on your point of view and what issue you're talking about. Okay, you have a comment?
I do, and in the context of the question.
Okay.
To comment directly on that, I would ask. Let me preface it with, I've heard a lot of people in the community, especially the Occupy movement, criticize mainstream media. And we all know that many of the printed media is in trouble economically. I believe, and I've said, that today, with the democratization of the technology, that we are the media. How the representatives here tonight, representing, if you will, with the exception of Debbie, because Debbie, she's part of we, the media, but the rest of you, how do you expect to remain relevant when we, the community now, are the media? In other words, let me put it this way, how are you going to keep them down on the farm once they've seen Paris?
Well, I can answer How many community members, how many community members can personally go interview every single candidate for public office? That's something that a newspaper can do and give you that information. The Olympian has had also forums with TCTV where we've brought in the state senators and talked about healthcare reform. We have the governor come into our editorial board and who talks to our political reporter. So we have a certain kind of access that by nature of being a newspaper, we have, that it's going to be hard for a lot of people to go talk to Chris Gregoire or Patty Murray or sometimes Mark Fauch. Yeah. So that's one thing that we can do.
Yeah, I think that like there's certain strengths, like what Matthew was saying, you know, in different types of media, like, and I think that in Olympia there are ways that community members can, you know, like how we were talking about all the different ways that they can sort of create their own stories. And I don't know if people maybe aren't aware of those different venues or maybe don't feel empowered to do that. But I think that there, and certainly for Works in Progress, I mean, that's how it started, was people feeling like, oh, our issues aren't being covered, let's create our own media. And I think that there are outlets for that, but I also think that it is important to have an organization and to have journalists where that's what they're doing full time. Like I'm a content director at a local firm here, and I wish that I could dedicate like my whole job and life to just doing journalism, but I can't because I'm totally new at this and I'm like a nobody, you know, so I have to like, I'm doing this part-time, and you know, there's so many times where I'm so, like now that I've been producing these articles, I'm so thankful that there are people that are doing this every day, dedicated, and it may not always be the type of coverage we want, and it may not be perfect, but it's still useful, I think.
I wanted to say something in this regard too, that first of all, that Mathias, who couldn't come tonight, Mathias, did have, he had interviews with all of the candidates for city council up on his website in the most recent election. And then the other thing is that there are different kinds of local, you know, of online discussions. Some blogs are more like a news reporting kind of a blog. Little Hollywood does good coverage of local issues with a real special emphasis on persons who are doing something, I mean, trying to highlight people who don't generally get noticed or seen. So that's a plug for Little Hollywood. Other blogs are more like they're into sort of back porch philosophizing and pontificating, and they're passing down judgments and often doing it anonymously and not taking responsibility or with a willingness to stand up. I'm thinking of Olympia Views there, and who did blog today saying that he would not be here because this particular forum didn't fit with the sociology, with the methodology of his sociology experiment, which is his blog.
In the same vein, I just learned how to do this on my blog, which is kind of exciting. And I just printed it out a couple days ago, that my most popular stories, because the question was about online blogs, I don't know if this is good or not. I mean, I don't know. It just says 3,716 times my story on Design Review Board recommends denial of Triway, the Rita Passage. And then my second most popular story is Planning Commission tables Isthmus rezone discussion. Third, Thurston County Board of Health hears biomass, something to do with biomass, definitely. And the next one, the gooey politics of gooey duck aquaculture. And actually, for some reason, gooey duck is the #1 word that people typed into my blog to find out more about. So there are ways, I don't think when I started my blog in 2009, I didn't know this kind of information. I think that's what Google is doing now. Go ahead, Marissa, but isn't that interesting? You know, so I think what people are looking for, at least I feel that that's what my interest is, and what I'm trying to contribute to the community is hyper-local journalism that I think each of us really care about, because it does have to do something with our environmental, you know, quality of our lives, with the air we breathe, or land use issues, or things that we can have a real impact on.
My question was to the person who asked this question. Maybe you could clarify when you said online discussion, because when I heard that first, I thought you were talking about like a forum or a place where there was actually like a discussion, you know, between writer and reader, or between readers. I don't know if that's what you were talking about, but if so, I don't really.
Did somebody ask that question? Do they want to elaborate on the question? Or have you left?
If nothing else, I think one thing that's really, really changed in media in my lifetime, I'm almost 60 years old now, and I have seen changes where the media used to lead. The media started the stories, they investigated the stories, they led, people saw them, they commented, they had ideas. I don't think that's as true anymore. I think people are leading to some extent, and to a lesser extent, mass media is following what people are interested in, what you talked about, being able to find out what stories she wrote people are interested in. That might lead you to investigate more things of that type. It might not, because you have a different objective, but I don't think mass media leads what's going on anymore in the way it used to. It just doesn't. We used to have 3 TV channels. When Walter Cronkite said something, everybody knew the next day what he was talking about. That isn't true anymore. It's not mass in the same way. There's a million outlets and a million things, and people have access to their own tools to create their own stories, their own information. So to some extent, more people are leading in many different directions rather than having these sort of monolithic entities that tell everybody what's news.
The other thing that has happened is the news cycle has shrunk. What used to be a 3 or 4 day news cycle, you know, somebody would get a tip on something, and I mean, look how long it took to break Watergate. It took them a couple of weeks before they got to a place where they were comfortable bringing it up and saying, you know, and they investigated it forever. So just the news cycle has shrunk. You know, it used to be many days, and then it became 24 hours. And, you know, for Pete's sake, now it's 24 minutes, you know, with Twitter. And that, I mean, I think Jerre made a really good point that, you know, people are at meetings tweeting salient items that just came up in this, you know, so you could have literally 3 or 4 or 5 potential leads tweeted out in 15 minutes. And I think you're absolutely right, Toni, that to some extent the news media is following. And, you know, it's really frustrating for me to, especially with some, you know, national stories. It's like, yeah, you know, I'm really sorry Michael Jackson died. I'm really sorry Whitney Houston died. That's great. I don't need to hear about it for 7 days. It's tragic, you know, but there's a war in Afghanistan, and there are, you know, people still living in tents in Haiti, and, you know, I mean, the world is a complicated place, and let's move on. But it's just the news cycle has gotten so short that it's really difficult to get you know, kind of an in-depth perspective on anything before the next thing pops up. So, you know, it's a real challenge.
I think also the consumers of news have changed, and one thing that is a challenge for us as mainstream media is combating the unwillingness of some consumers of news to entertain a perspective that is not theirs. It's why the television stations that we know have a certain point of view are so popular, because people want to hear what they already know. And it's much more challenging to entertain what you don't know, or something that is maybe different than what you think you know.
Don't bother with information I don't agree with.
Yes.
I think part of it too might be that it used to be back in Walter Cronkite's day that news was true. News doesn't have to be true anymore. Fox News can't get into Canada because they still have a law that says if you call it news, it has to be the truth. That doesn't happen here anymore. With what Toni said, I wholeheartedly agree with, more on a local basis and more for people who are in this room. If you look at the general public, they're too busy trying to keep their head above water to pay attention in a lot of cases. And that's where you run into the phone news and all that other crap where, you know, I'm only gonna put in my background, and I travel tons.
Well, the media is a huge term, and so when people complain about the media, it can be everything from, you know, the tabloid to the New York Times, so it's a big group to be in.
Well, part of the problem too is that Fox News is in every hotel. When you walk in the lobby, they're in every bar, they're all over the place because they're free cable. And so we're getting people who don't pay that much attention, and what they hear is not true.
Well, and it's both, I think it's both great that people aren't necessarily following and just accepting every word the media tells them is true, but it also, the media is reflecting people's desires. Like we were talking about Michael Jackson, for God's sake, tragic, but how many days was that the only thing on the news when there were big issues? But to some extent, the people are leaving what's on the news. The news isn't saying, well, this is a minor issue, not a big one. People are saying, we want to hear more about Michael Jackson. And so the media, the news, the mass media has to respond to that because people want to hear more about Michael Jackson. In some ways it's good because you're responding to what the public wants when they want more information about the issues. But is it really good for all of us if you're responding, I want to hear the details of Michael Jackson's shoes? You know?
Part of that, I think, too, is that you have people, how many times the number of people vote for American Idol and vote for American President? Okay? People want to be distracted. And if I can get 2 weeks worth of Michael Jackson's shoes or whatever, then I don't have to know about the people in Haiti still living in tents.
I think it begs a bigger question too, which has been on a lot of our minds. What is news now? There's so many places you can get it. It's so hard for anyone to tell what is and what isn't. And I think as anyone in the media, as a professional, we have a huge responsibility to delineate between the junk and what's real. And if it makes people think, then great. And just to ignore, you know, the fluff, and just focus on what is really news and important to our community, our world, our state, whatever.
Okay, we have one question back here and another one over there.
Part of comment too, but part of this deals with the fact that, like it or not, the media is a focuser of what it is that people get, okay? They don't necessarily just respond to what people want, they tell people what they want. And as you were saying, there are people still living in tents in Haiti. There are people living in tents
In Olympia.
right here, and you hear almost nothing about it. It turns out that after the state government, the largest single employer, the largest budget, the largest, the most significant product created in our community are a public agency who is almost never covered, and that's the schools. In fact, at the time of elections, you almost never hear anything about the candidates running for school board, despite the fact that they control more of your tax money than any other elected person you elect. And yet you never, or very rarely,
The
ever
past
cover
3
it.
days, we've had introductions of the 3 candidates for Olympia School District Superintendent. We have a full-time schools reporter. We have a huge number of schools, but,
How many hits do you get on that story though compared
Well,
to?
again, when you talk about what's important, there are stories that are hugely important to a small number of people. There are stories that are somewhat important to a large number of people. We try to do a mix of it.
But it becomes, you're a focuser of it. And the fact
We
is
must.
that-
I mean, you can't do everything. You have to pick and choose. Every media here picks and chooses what they're gonna do.
But I have to say, as someone, as a parent of 3 kids who knows that parents are a huge part of the community, we do really try and cover education a lot, so.
They cover the sporting events pretty good, but.
Oh, no, that's not.
How about the
me.
fact
I'm
that
the business
37% of the
examiner.
students don't graduate here? How about covering that?
Okay,
the
so
sports.
I have another couple of questions here, and we're sort of getting to the point where we want to wrap up and still have some chance for dialogue. But first of all, what percentage of your publication output or broadcast output would you say provides information that helps people better manage their lives?
It helps people what?
Better manage their lives.
Can I ask what, clarify what you mean by better management?
Yeah, because it could be the best deals at the grocery store and that kind of stuff, the most coupons and so forth. So, I could move into, in addition to that, are you contributing to a well-informed, how are you contributing to a well-informed electorate?
Well, we certainly try. The one thing that Jerry mentioned was that we also try to write stories about things that we favor things that are coming up that people can get involved in, as opposed to a review of an event that happened in the past. For example, we try to one of the screens, if you will, about picking stories is there anything that somebody in the community could use this for, do something about it, or act on it in some way? And sometimes we've got stories that, okay, it might be informational, but we just don't see that there's a place for them to do something with it. And some of our stories are just goofy fun. If you're looking to date, we have a dating column. So we don't claim that everything in our newspaper is entirely,
That could fall under manage your life.
needy. Yeah.
They're meeting that.